Hey guys, welcome back. And the NFL season begins this week. And so, a series that we've done the last few years on the channel that has been a fan favorite amongst you guys is the weekly power ranking. So, we're going to keep that going. We are going to be starting off with my power rankings entering the year. And each and every Monday night after the game, we will be updating it. So, you're going to have winners, you're going to have losers, and this is going to look completely different by the end of the season. I couldn't be more excited about this. I have been kind of putting in some work this offseason to really try and enhance this series and make it some of the best pieces of content I have ever worked on. So I'm really, really excited to get this out to you guys and kind of get some feedback from you. If you guys are interested in this type of content, I've got tons of other NFL and college football content, including my weekly stock reports that will be going up each and every week. So that's going to be very exciting to stay tuned with. Just uploaded another one last night. So if you guys want to see who I thought improved their draft stock, hurt their draft stock, kind of where things stand there, be sure to go check that out. Also, be sure to sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use my code JWAC to get double your initial deposit, and helps out the channel, helps me out quite a bit. But let's go ahead and get started with these power rankings. We're going to go 32-1. Talking about each team, why I have them ranked where I do. Obviously, this is just entering the year. It's going to change as we go into it. But let's go ahead, kick this off with my number 32 team, New England Patriots. Now, the Patriots are a team that have a lot of question marks, particularly on the offensive side of the football. You draft Drake May with the number 3 overall pick, and he looked absolutely fantastic in preseason. A player that I had some concerns about looking at his footwork. Still was a top 10 player in the class for me, but there were a lot of concerns about Drake May and how he was going to translate to the next level. And I know it's preseason, but he looked pretty impressive in those games. He looked comfortable. He looked composed. He looked like he could read a defense. That's something that you want to see. He is not going to be starting week 1 for this New England team, however, because Jacoby Brissett is the guy that they are going to be going with. I think this is the right move ultimately because you have so many questions along that offensive line. City So has a lot of question marks in his own right. Are you going to play Chukwuma Okorafor, Fedarian Lowe? You drafted Caden Wallace, who was one of my least favorite picks of the day. A lot of question marks on that offensive line. You still don't know what Cole Strange is. David Andrews is getting up there in age, coming off one of his worst seasons. And then when you look at the defensive side of the ball, you have just as many question marks over there. Matthew Judon traded to the Atlanta Falcons. Christian Barmore, he's got blood clots. He's out. Your Hall of Fame defensive coordinator, Bill Belichick, is gone. And there's just so many question marks around this New England Patriots franchise. I don't see how they cannot be the worst team in the league entering the year. They were a bottom 3 team last year. They have even more question marks on this roster offensively. You still don't know who your number 1 receiver is. You drafted Javon Baker and Jalen Polk. Who's going to emerge there is a bit of a question mark, but a lot of questions around New England, and I don't really think we have a lot of answers. So they come in as my number 32 team. At number 31 for me, we are going to go with the New York Football Giants. Really, really tough team to predict. I really want to pick them as one of my sleeper teams this year because I do think there's a roadmap where this Giants team is a lot better than we're expecting. The defensive line should be one of the best units in football. Kayvon Thibodeau, well, I think the sack numbers are overrated. He now doesn't have to go one-on-one. He's going to be able to get number 2 matchups because you bring in Brian Burns, who has been very productive for Carolina. Dexter Lawrence is a monster in the middle of that defense. But the offense, so many question marks. Daniel Jones, is he good? Is he garbage? Malik Neighbors looks fantastic. He's one of the only players on this offense alongside Andrew Thomas that I don't have question marks around. The running game, who is going to step up in that department? Obviously, Eric Gray looked pretty solid in preseason. Seems like Devin Singletary is going to get a majority of the touches early on. So who's going to be that guy for the running back room? And the offensive line as a whole. You moved Evan Neal supposedly to guard. You bring in Jermaine Illuminor. Okay, I don't hate that. John Michael Schmitz was pretty horrible as a rookie. A lot of question marks on this offensive line. Really, 4 out of your 5 positions on the O-line, you got question marks. I like the John Runyon pickup. I think that was a solid move. And then the secondary, you lose Xavier McKinney. You're expecting a big jump from Tay Banks. I loved the Tyler Nubin draft pick. I think he could be a nice, smooth transition over. But the move that I really didn't like was Andrew Phillips, was a guy that I really didn't understand the pick. I didn't really like him as a prospect. I thought that he was very scheme specific, great in zone, maybe a good run defender, but he's a slot guy. He's probably going to be your number 2 corner. So many question marks around New York, and you got Daniel Jones probably on the hot seat, as well as Brian Daboll. Too many questions to my liking right now, and they're going to come in as my number 31 team. I just don't really know what to expect, and I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in football. At number 30, we've got the Washington Commanders. Now, this is a team that I do think is going to exceed this spot and probably end up around the 20 range by the end of the year. Jaden Daniels was a prospect that took a little bit of time for me to really get comfortable with taking him high, but once I did, you love the upside. He's a quarterback with elite dual threat abilities. He's going to come in and be a top 5 rushing quarterback in the NFL right away. He's got a ton of upside there. The offensive line is still the big question mark. We're just going to get that out of the way. I don't really know. Sam Cosmi is one of the best, most underrated guards in all of football. Outside of him, so many question marks around that offensive line. Really 4 out of the 5 positions yet again. But what they do have over the Giants, I think, I kind of like their weaponry a little bit more, at least on paper. Terry McLaurin is a proven number 1. He has been so productive with some horrible quarterback play, really his entire career. You brought in Luke McCaffrey. You did just trade Jahan Dotson, which was a bit of an interesting one. I love Ben Sinnott. I really like Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler as a tandem. I think you got a little bit more weapons than New York does. And then when you look at the defensive side of things, the question marks arise a little bit more. The linebacking core, I think, is going to be very interesting with Jamin Davis, Bobby Wagner, and Frankie Louvu. I like the secondary a little bit. I'm still holding out hope that Emmanuel Forbes can be a solid player in the league, but he was just so bad as a rookie. There are a lot of question marks to be asked there. The defensive line, you got Jonathan Allen, you got Daron Payne. Some concerns there on who's going to make it through the year. But I do trust Dan Quinn to really coach this defense. He did a really good job in Dallas. I think he's got pieces here that he can work with. They made some moves that I was a fan of, and I got them coming in at number 30. I think they got a little bit more upside than the Giants. I think they've got a favorable schedule, and I like the quarterback situation and weaponry a little bit more. Coming in at number 29 is probably my least favorite team in the entire NFL this year. It is the New Orleans Saints. The only reason I'm giving them this sort of benefit of the doubt is the defense. The defense always seems to exceed expectations due to good coaching from Dennis Allen on that side of the ball. But I don't think Dennis Allen makes it through this year. I think the Saints are going to be one of the worst teams in football this year. I think their over-under is like 7.5. I can't believe it's that high. This team is terrible on paper. Offensive line with Ryan Ramczyk, so many concerns on that side of the football. Defensive line, Cam Jordan's getting up there in age. Chase Young, who couldn't really make it on a bad Washington team last year, he's now your number 1 guy. He had some motor concerns going into the playoffs last year that were a bit odd. You kind of continue to go down the pecking order. The secondary, Marshawn Lattimore's been in trade rumors. Tyrann Mathieu getting up there in age. You got concerns there. You got concerns about the weaponry. I love A.T. Perry. That's your number 2. Rashid Shaheed is solid. Chris Olave, I feel like, is a low-end number 1. And then Derek Carr is the quarterback. I feel like I shouldn't have to go any further. Derek Carr is just not going to win you any games, especially not now. This is a Saints team that I have a lot of concerns about going into this upcoming season. I don't really know how they're going to pass the ball with the offensive line they have. The run game should be a little bit better. You got a full season of Alvin Kamara. That's something you can kind of hang your hat on. But other than that, I think the Saints team is really, really bad from top to bottom. I think they have a very legitimate shot to be the worst team in the league this year. They come in at number 29. At number 28, we're going to go with the other NFC South team that's at the bottom. That's going to be the Carolina Panthers. Carolina is a team that I actually think deserves a little bit more benefit of the doubt than we are giving them. This is a solid football team on paper, at least. They did a really, really good job of improving their weaknesses, and I think they had one of the best off seasons that we saw from any team. You start on the offensive side of the ball, you bring in Robert Hunt, you bring in Damian Lewis. Those are two huge moves. When you look at the interior offensive line that this team had last year, it was a joke. And you look at Bryce Young's numbers, doesn't have time to throw the football because he's got interior pressure every single play. The Panthers recognize that, and they're like, yeah, we're not letting that happen again, and we're going to go get Bryce Young some help on the interior. On top of that, you look at the receiving weapons that he had, and you're like, who is he throwing the ball to? Adam Thielen was actually pretty good for them last year. Outside of him, Jonathan Mingo didn't look very good. You just cut Terrace Marshall. I mean, those were the two big pieces, and DJ Chark as well. Now, this team did a really good job. You draft Xavier Legette at the back end of the first round. You trade up. You pick him at number 32. I love that as a big weapon for Bryce Young to get the ball on these deep routes that he threw so well at Alabama. And then you bring in Deontay Johnson, who I think might be one of the more underappreciated players in the league right now, and a guy that did a really good job of creating separation in Pittsburgh and getting open. There was just some clashing of heads between him and George Pickens, which is really what I think led to this decision to let him go. I really like what Carolina did this offseason. The defense is where you got concerns. I think Derek Brown, top 100 player in the league, at least in my books. J.C. Horn is a top 100 player when he's healthy. That's really the big concern. I like the coaching adjustments. I think Carolina is going to be a little bit more competitive than we're expecting. I've heard people say Bryce Young is going to be benched this year. I think that's absolute ludicrous. I don't see any chance that Bryce Young gets benched. And I've got them at the number 28 spot entering the year. Man, I'm going to piss some people off here. I got the Tennessee Titans at number 27. And it really just comes down to a lot of uncertainty. I think Tennessee's got a chance to be better than this. But we're going to start on the offense. I think the Calvin Ridley addition was the most overhyped addition that we've seen all year. Calvin Ridley is a very good athlete. He's got some really sharp routes. He's got some athleticism. He single-handedly lost Jacksonville some games last year. He has some of the worst hands, some of the worst body control for a wide receiver in the league. Now, he is a number 2 now. You pair him with DeAndre Hopkins, who I believe is out for the first few weeks, so already not off to a great start there. The offensive line, I still have question marks around. J.C. Latham was not a player that I was a fan of, and I think I had him as my offensive tackle number 5 in the class. They picked him in the top 10. So not really a move that I was a big fan of, but they did it. And again, I don't love the pick. Defensively is where this team really made their marks. You draft Savondre Sweat, a big nose tackle. You trade for L'Jarius Sneed, which I love that pickup. You bring in Chidobe Awuzie. I like that pickup as well. And Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, and Ernest Jones, other names that this team brought in. But I got to be honest, it's not really doing anything for me. When you look at some of these guys, I think the Ernest Jones pickup was by far the best pickup that this team made outside of Sneed, because Ernest Jones was one of the best blitzing linebackers in football last year. My big concerns with this team really lie in the trenches. I don't know what the offensive line is going to look like, nor the defensive line here in Tennessee, because Jeffrey Simmons, we know he's a monster, but who is going to be rushing the passer? That's really what it comes down to. It's why I like the Ernest Jones pickup so much, but haven't really seen it. So we'll see what this team looks like. I also am not a believer in Will Levis. I know some people think he could be on breakout watch and have a big season. I'm not one of those guys. I've got Tennessee at number 27. And until they prove that they can win, that's kind of where I think they're going to stay for now, because I think this is a team that a lot of people look at all the moves they made and they're like, oh, Tennessee, they're going to be sneaky. I can't quite get there with this team. I think that there are a lot of names, but I don't really know if they help this team all that much. So I got them at 27. At number 26, it is the number 1 team here that I've actually gotten to see in person. I went to training camp, got to see this team up close, and admittedly, they did jump up because of what I saw, and it is the Denver Broncos. they're in a very similar spot as like the Tennessee Titans for me, and a lot of uncertainties around the quarterback. But I was higher on Bo Nix than I was on Will Levis. I think Bo Nix is a very pro-ready quarterback. He comes into the league as a guy with some of the most college football experience, most starts that we've ever seen. And he's in an offense that I think just favors his skill set so perfectly. Sean Payton is a quarterback that is, or is a coach that wants to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly, utilize these short slants, and utilize the run game to help the quarterback. And you saw it in the way Denver wanted to draft this year. You bring in Bo Nix, that's very similar to the type of offense that he ran at Oregon. They drafted Audric Estime, and they signed Blake Watson as an undrafted free agent. So you like those moves. They made moves to really try and help their young quarterback. And he's behind a pretty solid offensive line. I think outside of Lloyd Cushenberry going to Tennessee, you've got some really solid players. You got Quinn Miners, who got a big extension. Garrett Bowles, who's really turned it around and had a pretty nice career so far on the left side of that offensive line. And then the defense. Vance Joseph did a really solid job of turning this defense around in the second half of the year. Pat Surtain, number 2 corner in the league. Sorry, I still have Sauce Gardner ever so slightly ahead of him, but Pat Surtain, you can't see him. He's on the wall right here. Big fan of Patrick Surtain. This is a really good football team, I think. I think they're going to be better than people are expecting. I think Zach Allen could have a big year. I love the Jonah Ellis acquisition as well. This is a solid team. I think they're well coached. I like the quarterback situation, and I like the weapons and the trenches that they have. My big concerns with this team, who's going to be the number 2 corner? That's really going to be up in the air until we see kind of what they can do. And can this team generate a lot of pressure? Zach Allen got a ton of snaps last year. He got pressures from the interior. Who is going to step up on the outside? Is that going to be Jonah Ellis? Is it going to be Baron Browning? Do we see a breakout from Nick Bonito? Those are kind of my big question marks with this Broncos team right now, but I got them at number 26. I think they're going to be pretty solid this upcoming year. At number 25, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're another team I want to put on my breakout watch because I think that this team has potential, but I really don't know what the quarterback situation looks like. That's really what it comes down to, and I think it goes a little bit further than that on the offensive side. Who is going to be running the ball for this team? You know, you could talk about Zamir White. He's been in the league for 3-4 years now. I get he's been a number 2, but like you look at some of the other number 2 backs in the league, whether that be a Devon Achane that was utilized pretty well. We've seen Damian Harris as a number 2 that's been okay. We've seen Devin Singletary as a number 2. We've got nothing from Zamir White up to this point in his career. Gardner Minshew, as a Colts fan, really disappointed me. He did lose them a couple of games last year. I know people are going to argue with that. I watched every Colts game start to finish. Gardner Minshew lost them a couple of games, including keeping them out of the playoffs. Yes, that is on him. It was a horrible throw. The defense, I think, is going to be really interesting. You bring in Christian Wilkins to pair alongside Max Crosby, which is so nasty. But what are you going to get from Tyree Wilson? What is this secondary going to look like? Those are some question marks that I have, and we haven't really seen these interim coaches turned head coaches pan out. I like Antonio Pierce. I do think this one is going to work, but he's kind of going against the grain here. And so I do have the Raiders coming in at 25 until I can see some more consistency in that quarterback room, can see what this run game is going to look like. I do like the offensive line. I think they're going to be a pretty good unit, but I got them at 25 entering the year. At number 24, it is one of my sleeper teams this year. It's the Arizona Cardinals. I really like Arizona this year. I think Arizona is going to be really good, and I think they got a top 5 running game in the NFL right out the gates. Kyler Murray, excellent rushing quarterback that makes plays happen with his legs. He extends plays in the backfield and he's got a crazy great arm. But James Conner is one of the most underappreciated backs, and you drafted my number 1 running back in Trey Benson. So I really, really like those pickups. And now you got Kyler, Conner, and Benson. That's something that you feel like you can really work with if you're the Arizona Cardinals. On top of that, you add one of the best receiving prospects I've ever seen in Marvin Harrison Jr. This team has quite a few of my guys from the past few drafts. Trey McBride, he looks like he's going to enter that top 5 tight end status this year. Michael Wilson is the perfect number 2. And then you got Greg Dortch in the slot, who's kind of a gadget player. You can use him in a whole bunch of ways. I think this offense is going to be really, really fun this year. The defense is one of the worst defenses I've ever seen constructed, and I really don't want to go into any depth about it because it is so bad. You draft Darius Robinson. He's going to be out for a little bit. Now, I do think there's promise in the secondary. You got Julian Thompson and you got Budda Baker. Two really, really strong safety players. And I liked some of the other guys. You draft Max Melton, who I really liked. You got Garrett Williams, who was a huge my guy before the ACL tear. And then you draft Elijah Jones. So three really interesting corner players there. I think you got two outside guys and Melton in the slot. I love that. The defensive line is going to be almost impossible for this team to create any sort of pressure. So this team's going to have to score 35 points a game if they're going to win. That's really where my concerns with Arizona lie at this moment, and that's why they're coming in at number 24. At number 23, it seems to be everyone's favorite sleeper team, and it is the Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert finally has an offensive-minded head coach that he can work with in Jim Harbaugh, and you feel pretty excited about the direction of this Chargers franchise. This is a team that was picking in the top 5, and to a lot of people's surprise, they took Joe Alt with the number 5 overall pick. I was one of the few people that loved that pick. Justin Herbert has dealt with injuries throughout his career. He's been banged up, taking hard hits. You gotta protect him. He's one of the best young quarterbacks in the league, and now he's got Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt protecting him. You feel really excited about that if you're a Chargers fan. There are still a lot of concerns I have about this team, starting with the weaponry. Running back, tight end, and wide receiver, so many question marks. I loved Quentin Johnston as a prospect. He's got to show me that he can catch, period. Ladd McConkey, bit of an undersized slot type of guy. I don't think he's a true number 1. And then Josh Palmer, he's coming off an injury. Really like what he has shown as a number 3, but that was as a number 3. You don't really have anyone in the tight end room that I feel like you can hang your hat on. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Kamani Vidal, kind of a hodgepodge of guys there that nobody's really carved out a role for themselves. So you got questions there. And then defensively, this team has a little bit of I feel like we need to see a little bit more. I like Khalil Mack was incredible last season for this team, but can Bosa stay healthy? Can Derwin James stay healthy? Can Asante Samuel take that next step? We haven't really seen that yet. And so defensively, I think there's some concerns with this team, and I don't think they have the weapons. You're in a loaded AFC, but I do feel like this is a franchise that's finally taken things in the right direction. While I do have question marks, I think they're going to be competitive, and they come in at number 23. At number 22, we got the Minnesota Vikings, and this is a team that I wish I could pick higher, but it's kind of the same deal we had with the Raiders. Who is stepping up for this team? Who is going to be that guy at the quarterback position? And you thought J.J. McCarthy was going to kind of get the reins at about the week 5, week 6 mark. It's not going to happen now. He's out for the year. So you're kind of relying on Sam Darnold now. In Darnold's defense, the last time we actually did get to see him didn't look half bad. You've seen some different stuff here. He looked okay in Carolina. Before he got hurt, he looked okay in times for San Francisco. When he's been in this sort of offense, he hasn't looked bad, but we really haven't seen it in a number of years with Sam Darnold. So what are we going to get from him? That's something that remains to be seen. But he's got the most weapons that he's ever had in his career. Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in football. Jordan Addison, you got TJ Hawkinson on this team. You've got Aaron Jones as a really good running back that can catch balls out of the backfield. And I think this defense, while I don't love the secondary, I like the Stephon Gilmore pickup. I think Dwight McLaughlin, I didn't check before this video. I don't know if he made the team as a UDFA pickup. You guys know he was one of my favorite prospects in the draft. I thought he was a 3rd-round pick. This team has some players defensively, though, with Brian Flores that can kind of scheme this up. They're going to be competitive. I do like Minnesota, but they're at number 22. Just too many questions around the quarterback position that holds this team back substantially. At number 21, we've got the Seattle Seahawks. And Seattle is another team that I think has done a pretty nice job this offseason. They had one of the most impressive draft classes I think I can remember. You took Byron Murphy. I was lower on consensus than Byron Murphy, but I love the fit in this defense. You bring in the most coveted head coach from this cycle in Mike Macdonald. You still have one of the best wide receiver trios in the NFL. I like the running back room and kind of the way it's shrunk down a little bit. It's Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. I hated the Charbonnet pick. I don't hate it so much anymore. Noah Fant is now going to be the number one tight end. The defense, I love this defense. I really, really do. You got Byron Murphy on the interior, which is a massive question mark. And you still got Witherspoon, and you still got Tariq Woolen, which is fantastic. But I think that Mike Macdonald has his work cut out for him. The safety room, still a bit up in the air. You look at this team. You got Julian Love. Outside of that, I don't really love any of the pieces here, no pun intended. On top of that, I really don't love the offensive line still. Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, and really all three players on the interior are still question marks for me. And you got Uchenna Nwosu already banged up, which was a concern for this team last year. Can this team stay healthy? That's something that we need to see, because if they stay healthy, I think Seattle has a chance to be a wild card team. But we're going to have to see how things pan out for them. I got them as the number 21 team entering the year. At number 20 is a team that I feel like I am higher on than the consensus, and it's Tampa Bay. And you guys can say it all you want. I'm a Baker Mayfield homer. I love Baker Mayfield. I will defend this guy until my dying age. I am a huge Baker Mayfield stan, and he was awesome last year. He was really, really good and helped Tampa get into the playoffs, a team that everybody thought was going to be the worst in this division. Everybody thought that, including myself. I think they did a really solid job this offseason at kind of making moves happen. I like the draft pick of Graham Barton. You move him to center, which was a disaster for this team last year, and I think this offensive line looks really good. You got Luke Gedeke at right tackle who played good. You've got Tristan Wirfs. You bring in Graham Barton, and you're hoping that Cody Mauk can take that next step. You got good trench play. You still got Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and you draft Jalen McMillan. You made some moves there that I feel pretty good about the offense. Defensively, you made some moves that, you trade Carlton Davis, which is a big one. That's a big loss for this team as your number 2 corner, and you instantly start asking a ton of questions there. I like Zion McCollum. He is my breakout player for this team, but we haven't seen him break out yet. So what are we going to get from him in that regard remains to be seen. You still have good players on this defense, though. Vita Vea, one of the best nose tackles in all football. I like Yaya Diaby. I like some of the pieces here. And you got Antoine Winfield, who is arguably the best safety in the NFL. I got him coming in at number 20. I'm a big fan of Tampa Bay. I think they've done a really, really good job at kind of building around their strengths. And they're my number 20 team entering the year. At number 19, I got the Pittsburgh Steelers. I always feel like I'm lower on the Steelers than the consensus, and I feel like that's going to reign true again this year. This is already a team that's dealing with the injury bug on the offensive line. Fautanu got hurt. Zach Frazier, or your starting center, I believe it was Mason Cole, he's out. So now you're kind of pushing Zach Frazier into a starting role when he didn't look particularly good in camp. Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, I like Russell Wilson. I think he's going to thrive in this situation. However, how much is thriving at this current stage of Russell Wilson? He didn't look good his last year in Seattle. He hasn't looked good the last 2 years in Denver. And now you're looking at this team with no weapons. I mean, really one of the worst group of weapons in all of football. They were unable to land Brandon Ayuk. So George Pickens is pretty much by himself on this team. And I really am unsure how that's going to look for this team going into the year. The defense, we got no questions about the defense. The defense is going to look awesome, per usual. But Arthur Smith, he wants to run the football. I'm not the biggest Najee Harris guy as it is. I have concerns about this Pittsburgh offense and how it's going to look, and they come in as my number 19 team. And I really want to see what this offense is going to look like entering the year. And I think they're going to be short of the playoffs again. At number 18, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars, and a team that I do quite like. As a Colts fan, I really don't want to like this Jags team, but this is a really well-constructed roster. Trevor Lawrence is a quarterback that just seems to continuously catch strays, and I don't get it. I really don't. I think Trevor Lawrence is a top 10 quarterback in football. He's incredibly accurate. And like I mentioned earlier with the Titans, Calvin Ridley lost this team games last year. You now are in a position where you don't really have to worry about that. You've got a really sound receiving room now. Christian Kirk is the best slot receiver in the NFL, I think. And then you mix that with a really solid Brian Thomas Jr., looked awesome in the preseason. Gabe Davis, who I didn't like all that much as a signing, but I do think he fits this team. I like that quite a bit, and I think it's an upgrade over Calvin Ridley. The offensive line should be better. The defensive line should be better. You bring in Eric Armstead, and you got Joshua Hines-Allen, who's looked awesome. You're hoping that Trayvon Walker can take the jump. Everyone's going to talk about Trayvon Walker and the sack numbers. The guy really still is such a project and a work in progress that I do have concerns about him. Now, on top of that, I think the secondary outside of Tyson Campbell is filled with question marks, but I do like this team. I think they're going to be competitive. I think they're going to be fighting for a wild card spot in the AFC. But until we can see a little bit more consistency in the run blocking and see the secondary kind of take that next step, I have Jacksonville coming in at number 18. At number 17, we got the Atlanta Falcons, and I like Atlanta, if you guys can't tell. They are my number one team from the NFC South, but I have a ton of question marks around this team. And the number one question is, what the heck is Kirk Cousins going to look like? We have not seen him play at all. Tore his Achilles, and we'll get to the Jets later, much later in this video. Everyone seems to have concerns about Rodgers' Achilles. Why aren't we asking any questions about Kirk Cousins' Achilles? We need to see him healthy. He's got good weapons on this team, but not elite. I like Darnell Mooney and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, but is Darnell Mooney a high-end number 2? I see him as more number 3. The offensive line is going to be fine. I don't have very many questions offensively. And defensively, I'm not going to say it's one of the worst units in football because I do think it's a strong secondary. Jesse Bates, A.J. Terrell, you bring in Justin Simmons. I like that. This pass rush last year, and Falcons fans wanted to argue with me on this, were bottom 5 in the league. Arnold Ebiketie did not look good, and the two guys that generated the most pressures for you were Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree. Both of them are gone. So now you have Arnold Ebiketie, Zach Harrison, Braylon Trice is out for the year, which I think he could have been a difference maker for this team. So that's why they make the Judon trade. And I like Matthew Judon. I think it's a good pickup for this team, a much-needed pickup for this team. However, he's coming off an injury. We have to ask questions about that. And I think everyone's like penciling them in as the favorites. And I don't think the gap between them and Tampa is that substantial. So I got Atlanta at number 17. I need to see this defense play up to their standards because last year was an absolute disaster for them. And what is Kirk Cousins going to look like? Until we get answers there, I got the Falcons at number 17. At number 16, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm all in on the Chicago Bears this year. I don't really see how you can not love this roster, the way it's constructed. Like, what are your question marks around this team? Who's the number 2 pass rusher? Okay, that's fair. And what is this offensive line going to look like? Those are really my only 2 question marks with this Bears team. I love the defense. This was a top 10 defense in the second half after they traded for Montez Sweat. They made some really interesting moves, though. Getting Austin Booker, who I viewed as a project, he was awesome. He was absolutely awesome in the preseason. He's a player to definitely keep on your radar. Jalen Johnson was an all-pro corner. And now you got Tyreek Stevenson, who looked good as a rookie entering year 2, and Kyler Gordon. You bring in Kevin Byard to pair with Jaquan Brisker. The secondary looks really strong. You have TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, probably the best linebacking duo in the NFL outside of Warner and Greenlaw, which I love. And the defensive line, you got Montez Sweat, who looked fantastic. And what's that number 2 going to look like? Is it going to be Austin Booker? Can Gervon Dexter take that next leap? We'll see. But I love the defense. And offensively, I mean, you have some really, really good weapons. And DJ Moore, who I think is the most underrated receiver in football right now. one of my favorite players in the league. If anyone knows a guy, I'm looking for a DJ Moore 8x10 to get on this wall. He's one of my favorites to watch in the NFL. You got Cole Kmet. You draft Romo Jones-A, who was my number 3 player in the draft, and Keenan Allen. You feel pretty good about that. And then you got DeAndre Swift, who specializes as a receiving back. I mean, Caleb Williams has so many weapons. The only question marks that I think that could hold this team back is the coaching. It's not Matt Eberflus, though, because I think Eberflus is a good coach. I think it's Shane Waldron that could keep this team from reaching the heights that I think they can. But I think the Bears are a top half team in the league this year. I'm all in on Chicago, and they come in at number 16 for me. At number 15, we got my team. It's the Colts, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I think this is a team that a lot of people are sleeping on a little bit. They've got weapons. Adonai Mitchell, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce. Like one of the best group of 4 receivers that you have, and Jonathan Taylor's healthy for the full year. This was a team that dealt with a lot of injuries on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Juju Brents was out. Anthony Richardson was out. Braden Smith was out. Like really big pieces for this team. You feel pretty good about where the offense is going to go, though. At their floor, I think they're a top 12 offense. Like I really think that's the lowest I could rank them, because this team was a borderline top 10 offense with Gardner Minshew. You now have Anthony Richardson, who, look, I have a lot of questions about Anthony Richardson myself. The preseason I thought was good. I think a lot of it was miscommunication stuff, but he left you with a little bit more. Like you need a little bit more from him, and we didn't see that from him. So that's really kind of where the questions start with Anthony Richardson. But if he can be 50% of what we think he can be, like let's just say like his max is like this Cam Newton type player. If he's like half that, the Colts should be one of the best teams in football. Like this team has the offense, and I think they have the defense as well. They have a really solid defensive unit. The secondary is probably going to get cooked in some games early on, but it is a young group that I think is going to continue to get better. I got them at 15. I think this is their floor going into the year. I just don't really see how you could rank them any lower, because this was a team that was one game away from the playoffs with injuries everywhere. You're healthy. You have a top 5-10 head coach in the league, in my opinion. I got him at 15. I think this is a team that is going to surprise a lot of people this year. At number 14, we got the Los Angeles Rams, and if they had any resemblance of a NFL-level defense, they would probably be in the top 10. But this is one of the worst defenses in all of football, and they might be up there with the Arizona Cardinals as the worst defense in the league. Now, why I give them the edge is because I at least think they have pieces that you can kind of hang your hat on and be like, okay, that's a guy for us. Kobe Turner was a really, really good for this team. Jared Verse was one of my favorite prospects in this class, and Braden Fisk, good pass rusher from the interior. Those are 3 young guys that you feel pretty strongly about, but you're relying on a second-year player and 2 rookies to kind of carry this defensive line. There's a lot of question marks there. Now, where we don't have a single question mark is the offense. Run game is going to be elite again with Kyron Williams. Your passing game is going to be elite with Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Like, you feel pretty good about that group. But the defense is just so bad. They're awful. Tre'Davious White, you got some question marks there. Kobe Durant, a lot of concerns for me with this Rams team, and I got them coming in at number 14. At number 13, it's the Miami Dolphins, and I know I'm lower on the Dolphins than the consensus is. I'm just really worried about this offensive line. I mean, Teron Armstead can't stay healthy, and that's really what it comes down to. And, like, you lose Robert Hunt and Connor Williams this offseason, 2 really, really good pieces for their offensive line. They're both headed out to NFC teams. And now, like, you're relying on Isaiah Wynn. Yikes. Austin Jackson's been okay. Just there's too many question marks for me with this offensive line, and it's an offensive line that needs to be good for Tua, because if he takes a couple of hits, I mean, we can't just act like the concussions aren't still a concern with him. He had 3 concussions just 2 years ago. He's 1 hit away from his NFL career being done. I also really have concerns about the defense. Like the pass rush, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb coming off injuries. Chop Robinson was a guy I was a little bit lower on because, yes, the athleticism's there, but just not a good bag of pass rush moves. I got him at 13. I know the secondary is good with Kendall Fuller, Javon Holland, Jalen Ramsey. It's a good secondary. But I still have too many concerns about the O-line and the D-line that hold them back, and I got him at number 13. At number 12, we've got the Buffalo Bills. Now, Buffalo is a team that is really here because of Josh Allen. I mean, we'll just say it how it is. They're here because Josh Allen is a superhuman. He's one of the most electric, exciting quarterbacks in all of football. He's got a cannon arm. He can run the football. I don't need to tell you guys how good Josh Allen is. You guys know. But the defense is good. I like the defense. I think they got pieces that I feel pretty solid about. Ed Oliver, Teron Johnson, the safety room is okay. They're not a bad defense. I think like I said, they're dragged up because Josh Allen is Josh Allen. You do have a lot of concerns about what's Von Miller going to look like. What is this weaponry going to look like? I mean, I like James Cook and I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. I think they're two fantasy players I'm targeting all season long. But is Keon Coleman the number one? Is it Khalil Shakir? What is the number one receiver going to look like for this team? That remains to be seen. We don't know. I like Keon Coleman. I was higher on him than a lot of people were. But there are a lot of concerns there on what he is going to look like. So we need to see it. We need to see what this team's going to look like. I don't have concerns about the O-line. I don't have concerns about the D-line really either. It's really what is the weaponry going to look like? And I got them at number 12. I still think they're a playoff team in a loaded AFC. At number 11, how about them Cowboys? We got the Cowboys here. I mean, this team is really, really tough because on one hand, they're going to be good. Like, their defense should be solid. You got Trayvon Diggs coming back. You got Micah Parsons, who's my pick to win Defensive Player of the Year. You still got DeMarcus Lawrence. You got some pieces here and there. But this team lost a lot this offseason. I don't think a lot of people are really talking about the amount of pieces they lost. You lost your defensive coordinator. You lost your number one running back. Who is going to be your number two receiver this year? That's another question mark you got. You lost multiple pieces on the D-line. Sam Williams is out for the year. You lost Dorrance Armstrong. Leighton Vander Esch retired. I mean, this team has a lot of question marks, and yet I still think they're going to be pretty good. I like Dak Prescott in the regular season. I think he's going to get the job done. I like CeeDee Lamb a lot. I think he was worth every penny. You guys can go back last year when we did this. I was like, I'm lower on CeeDee Lamb. I don't like CeeDee Lamb. I was wrong. CeeDee Lamb is a top 3 receiver in football right now. I don't think it's particularly close. This team's they're going to be good. They're going to win football games. They're going to have a defense that's going to be in your face, and they're going to be able to win through the air like we saw last year. But when it comes down to the playoffs, I don't think they're going anywhere. It's the same story every year with Dallas, and that's why they're at number 11. And I do have a lot of question marks around this rushing attack. What is this rushing game going to look like? I do think the O-line, like Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe, look like they're going to be studs for them. But, I mean, Ezekiel Elliott and Dalvin Cook, yikes. I got them at number 11. At number 10, it's the Cleveland Browns. And I think this is another one of those teams that is really slept on amongst NFL circles right now. I mean, find me a weakness in this Browns roster. Offensive line is a top 10 unit in the league. Rushing game could be a top 10 unit if Nick Chubb comes back and is Nick Chubb. But that's one of the big question marks. Receiving game should be in the top half of the league right now. Amari Cooper is a monster. Jerry Jeudy, I actually think, fits pretty perfectly here with this team. You got David Njoku. You draft my guy, Jamari Thrash, who was awesome in the preseason. I love that. Defensively, this is the second best defense in football. So, I mean, there's really no weaknesses here except Deshaun Watson. And even that, he's 5-1 as a starter. Like, there's not, at least last year he was. There's not a lot to, like, we just haven't seen a big enough sample size with Deshaun Watson. Now, he didn't look amazing, but he was winning football games. And he is He's a better option than Joe Flacco was last year. I mean, this team has legit Super Bowl chances. It just really hangs on, can you run the football, and what is Deshaun Watson going to look like? If those look anything sort of like a good NFL team, the Browns might go around and win the AFC this year, and that's why they're at my number 10 spot. My number 9 team is the Houston Texans, and this is another team that it's really hard to find weaknesses in. You got a really electric young quarterback. You got the best wide receiver trio in the NFL, an O-line that should be pretty good. You got a good secondary that I'd say it's good. I wouldn't give it great because you need another jump from Derek Stingley. I think we need to see Kamari Lassiter. What is he going to look like? The safety room has some question marks with Kalen Bullock, Jalen Petrie, and Jimmy Ward. Really, the question marks to me are on the defensive line, and it's not Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson. They're both electric in their own rights. My question marks with this team are the interior because you lost some pieces on this front, and you lost some big pieces. This team was good as a run defense team, but they don't really profile to be a good team against the run. Christian Harris, Azeez Al-Shaair as well. A bit of concerns there. And then the running game. I think Joe Mixon has fallen off. I really do. I think Texans fans are overrating that pickup quite a bit. I don't think he's going to have the impact we think he's going to have. Also, is Stephon Diggs going to be a cancer for this locker room like he has been in Buffalo and in Minnesota? Because it definitely feels like it could be headed that direction really, really quickly. I like this Texans team. I think they're the clear favorite in the AFC South. They got a good coach. They got an elite offensive mind at the offensive coordinator spot. They're my number 9 team. I think they're going to be really good. I think this is up to par with where most people would have them going into the year. At number 8, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals, who I think did a really good job of finding the holes on this roster and improving them. You got a good right tackle. You let Jonah Williams walk. You bring in Trent Brown and Demarius Mims, one of the best 1-2 punches. I was watching that franchise guy do the deep dive on the Bengals, and he said it best. I mean, Demarius Mims went to 18 while only playing like 6 games in college. We had a big question mark around his sample size. But when you take his moments as a tackle and put them up against every tackle, Joe Alt, Olu Fashanu, I mean, I would have taken Demarius Mims number 1 if he had the bigger sample size because he was just so good. He was so technically sound, had good run blocking, good pass blocking. I really liked that about him. I think this run game actually might improve a little bit. You got Chase Brown. Zach Moss was really, really solid for the Colts last year. Showed good contact balance. You might not have a true number 1, but I think you got a nice duo there. The defense, I think, is going to be, you got to replace DJ Reader. That one's going to be a big one. But overall, I think this defense should be better. You bring in Geno Stone to replace whatever you got from Nick Scott last year. I think anything you get from Geno Stone is going to be an upgrade. You got Jordan Battle, who should be getting a little bit more reps. I mean, you feel pretty good about that safety room, better than you did last year. And then Joe Burrow's back. And I mean, that's a big one. And whether you're concerned about the Joe Burrow wrist or not, there is a bit of some odd stories coming out. Like, we don't really know the status of the wrist injury, but I'm not too worried about it. I think this team's going to be really good. I think they're going to be in the playoffs yet again. And I got them at number 8. I think this team is going to have the best offensive line they've had in the Burrow era. We know how good of a receiving team they are. Yeah, you lost Tyler Boyd, but you got Andre Yoshivas, you've got Jermaine Burton, and you feel pretty good about that. So I've got them at number 8. I think they're going to be really good, and I have them ultimately being in the mix again for the AFC North. At number 7, I've got the Green Bay Packers, and they're the youngest team in the league. They might be the best team in the NFC this year. I mean, there's another team. Just find me a weakness. They just picked up Josh Jacobs to be an elite running back, and I didn't love the Marshawn Lloyd pick, and then A.J. Dillon goes down for the year with a neck injury. So Marshawn Lloyd's going to play this year. The receiving core, you might not know who that number 1 guy is this year. You've got at least 4 or 5 guys that you feel pretty good about. Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, And then like you got Bo Melton as well. It's like a really solid like gadget type receiver. You got two good tight ends, and Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, and a good O-line. This offense looks elite. The only weakness is the linebacking core. And like even that's not really a weakness. The secondary is going to be much improved with Xavier McKinney and Javon Bullard coming in. You got Jair Alexander, who should be healthy for the whole year. I mean, this team's going to be awesome. I think this team is so balanced. They were one of the best teams in the league the second half of last season because Jordan Love took that jump and he looked absolutely incredible. This team's going to be really good. I have Green Bay. I mean, spoiler alert, I have them winning the Super Bowl this year. I picked that in my season predictions video last week. So I'm all in on Green Bay. They're my number 7 team entering the year. At number 6, we've got the New York Jets. And another team outside of Aaron Rodgers' health. This might be the most talented roster in football. The offensive line is the most improved unit of any team in the league. You bring in Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Morgan Moses. 3 starters for this offensive line. That is massive for them. The secondary is already elite. The defense is already elite. And then you bring in Hassan Reddick, who I think is going to end up playing ultimately. You look at the receiving room. I mean, you got Garrett Wilson. You got Mike Williams when he's healthy. You bring in Malachi Corley. You got Allen. I mean, you got some pieces there that you feel pretty good about. And I love the running back room. Can Aaron Rodgers stay healthy? That's really what it's going to come down to. Because if he is healthy and he is 75% of Aaron Rodgers, this Jets team has got a very legit chance to be in the Super Bowl. I mean, it's as simple as that to me. This is a loaded roster. I've got them at number 6. I don't really have many question marks with this team. And I think Rodgers, I lean towards the side of optimism. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be pretty good this year. So I got the Jets at number 6, just outside the top 5, because that is a pretty big looming question mark around this team. At number 5, we've got the Baltimore Ravens, a team that is going to dominate on the ground and has a weak receiving room. I think it's as simple as that. I think this receiving room is got a lot of question marks. I mean, Zay Flowers, I've got a picture of Zay going up on the wall. Love Zay Flowers. Loved what he showed last season. However, I do have question marks about that number 2. Rashad Bateman hasn't really been great. He's been very inconsistent. Mark Andrews coming off an injury. Isaiah Likely, I do quite like. We'll see what he can be. The offensive line also is major question marks on this team. I mean, you've got Ronnie Stanley as a question mark. You've got Daniel Faalele at guard that probably won't last. Roger Rosengarten, the play strength is a concern for me. I think he's going to be fine. But there were times, like he had a good preseason, but there were times where he was getting pushed back. The anchor definitely needs to improve on him. The defense should be pretty good, though. I mean, they were great last year, one of the top 5 units. I think they're going to be good again. Jadeveon Clowney and Patrick Queen both leaving. Big losses for them, but I think they've got pieces to replace it. I feel pretty good about Trenton Simpson. I feel pretty good about David Ojabo coming in as well. So I think this team's going to be pretty good. I've got them at number 5. I have them as an AFC Championship contender again, and they come in as my number 5 team in the NFL. At number 4, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles, and a team that is, I mean, they fell apart in the second half of last season. Let's just call it how it is. They were awful. I don't think it's going to be the same this year. I think they have had an awesome offseason, to be quite honest with you. Improved the offense by trading for Jahan Dotson, signing Saquon Barkley. You improved the defense by really just adding pieces to the secondary. I mean, that's all they needed to do. You bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson. You bring in Quinyon Mitchell, my CB1. You bring in Cooper DeJean. I feel pretty good about that. Jalen Carter taking a leap. I mean, Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelsey retiring, it hurts a little bit, but this team had been preparing for that. They had the pieces in place. They bring in new offensive and defensive coordinators, which was much needed. I think they're going to be really good. I think they're going to contend for a Super Bowl this year because this is a roster that made the Super Bowl just 2 years ago. There's a better roster than that team was 2 years ago. They are absolutely loaded, and I got them at number 4. I think they're going to be awesome, and they're my number 4 team in the league. At number 3, we've got the Detroit Lions, another team that I think had an awesome offseason. Improve the interior of their defensive line by adding DJ Reader. You improve the receiving room. You add Tim Patrick, which is like quietly one of the best moves that this team could have made as a possession receiver for a red zone threat. You add pieces on the offensive line. You bring in Kevin Zeitler, who was really, really good for the Ravens last year. And then you also bring in Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. I mean, they really loaded up in the secondary. You let Cam Sutton go, who was not great last year. And the secondary should be really fun this year. You got Terrion Arnold, who I think was their first-round pick. And then you double-dipped and took Ennis Rakestraw, which I was a big Ennis Rakestraw guy, so I loved that. I think they made really good moves. You still got Brian Branch. You got Kirby Joseph. Aiden Hutchinson takes a jump. James Houston will be healthy this year. The Lions were in the NFC Championship game and I think got better. I think they're going to be a really, really fun team this year. They are my number 3 team. At number two, we got the Niners. They bring back Ayuk. I don't really think that there's many question marks around this team. Dre Greenlaw's health, maybe the consistency of the offensive and defensive lines you might have some concerns about, but I'm not really worried about it. The Niners were in the Super Bowl last year. They're bringing back pretty much everybody. I mean, you lose Chase Young. I don't really think that was something that they were worried about. Chase Young was kind of a luxury for them last year anyways. And they bring in Leonard Floyd, who I think actually might be better for them than Chase Young was for them last year. So really, really good team. I mean, not a lot of question marks on them. They're my number 2 team. But of course, at number 1, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs. Don't even think I should have to explain this. They won the Super Bowl. They got better in the receiving room with Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown. I mean, this team's going to be better than they were last year, more than likely. It just kind of, they will probably be just as good as they were last year. It just is, are the other teams in the AFC going to get better? The Jets, the Texans, the Colts, the Bengals, the Browns, like the Dolphins. A lot of questions around what the rest of this AFC is going to look like. But Kansas City is still the top dog until proven otherwise. And that's going to do it. So let me know, what do you guys think of my power rankings going into week 1? Leave a like, subscribe if you are new, comment down below what types of videos you guys want to see next. I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.